let me just say that I think we're signing the books after this, and you will get an original bunny drawing with your name attached to it if you acquire one. This is going to be really spontaneous. I don't have a prepared thing, and I hope I can remember how to do this. I'm just going to show you sort of a survey of what I've been doing for the last 50 years. And I graduated from college in the South in Louisiana at Tulane. Started out at Vanderbilt, hated it. Great school, not for me. Tulane had great courses, and I took even Louisiana architecture from Sam Wilson, which led to my 45 years later, whatever it is, purchasing two old plantation homes and restoring them. When I first moved to New York, I had gone to the Skowhegan School of Painting and Sculpture in Maine, the state I was born in. My father was a naval officer, and he went to MIT after Annapolis, and my parents were summering in Maine, so I was born in this little island where the Naval Hospital is in Kittery. Anyway, so I returned to Maine to go to the Skowhegan School, and we had just amazing people that summer. Betty Davis even was there for 3 weeks, and I was always knocking on the door so she'd answer it. I got a little award, and she introduced me to her son. I was sitting under an apple tree with a friend, and she drove up, and I said, "Johnny, that's Betty Davis." And I hadn't even seen her. I just had picked up her energy. She was so ferociously intelligent, just as spectacular in person as on the screen. Anyway, Louise Nevelson was there, Alex Katz, Phil Pearlstein, Jack Levine, Sylvia Stone, Alice Neal, Richard Estes. It was a real tremendous introduction to some of the great artists of that period. And I got a lot of encouragement to just move to New York and not go to graduate school, which was a grueling experience to do that because I just had every job under the sun, from sorting mail at Burlington House to a one-day stint at El Morocco as a waiter. I finally landed on my feet with, I was hired under the Cultural Council Foundation Artist Project, which was like the recreation of the WPA under the Carter administration. I got to get paid for doing public art. I was selected one of 3 people to do 80-foot murals for the Port Authority in the World Trade Center. My mural was in the tower of 43rd floor of Tower 1, which I watched collapse. And I did 8 Saints for a church in Brooklyn, which was a very wonderful experience. I'll show you some of this as we go along. I'm just trying to remember as we go here. I did big murals for schools in Brooklyn, but it was great. Pollock and Gorky and all these people that had been hired under the WPA to do these murals in the past. They punched time clocks and did paintings, and when they were through, the government sold their paintings as steam pipe wrapping. While we were, I'll bitch now, while we were doing our murals, which even the Museum of Modern Art had to approve it. We'd start, and then yet another committee would come up. They were spending, and we had to sign this thing saying if they didn't like it, they had the right to destroy them or cover them over. They were spending $2 million to restore the James Brooks murals at LaGuardia Airport, which I just saw on my way to Boston a week ago, and it is one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. It's in a rotunda, and it's all marble. It's like, a great Roman building. And it's just, if any of you haven't seen that is one of the best things I've seen in here. This is a painting I did for the Tom Sokolowski, who was the first director of the Warhol Museum in Pittsburgh. Another Rose of Lima painting that my accountant owns. This is Vishnu. I started to do both Hindu and Christian saints. So this is a reclining Vishnu. I visited Tirupati in India, where they say anything that you wish comes true. It was one of the great experiences of my life. I was in Madras, and people that organized my show had some people staying with them and said, "We're going to Tirupati, but you can't come because you're Western." They don't really like that. Anyway, we went. The car broke down. We got there like 5 in the morning. Everybody's heads, not on, but pilgrims shave their heads and their feet are washed. It's like being in ancient Egypt or something. It's so incredible. And the statue actually has the cover on the face. That's the way it's usually portrayed, because it's so powerful that it would literally burn a hole in you if you stared at it too long. Anyway, they say anything you wish comes true there. My wish did come true. This is the dead Christ, Grunwald, I believe. I did this after the other one. This is an experience I had in Guatemala at Atitlan. This thing appeared in my window one night when I was sleeping, and walked over to my bed and then just disappeared. It was very pleasant. It was very real. I was told later there was a greeting from the temple at the bottom of Lake Atitlan, which is so deep that even sonar can't find the bottom of it. Anyway, it led to a lot of interesting things in my life. I had shows in Guatemala in the late 70s and spent a bunch of time there. After my trips to Peru and visiting the Gold Museum, which is just unbelievable, I did these huge series of Inca gold paintings, which I showed at Exit Art in New York, and I did get a review in the Times for it, but they were never really popular, but I thought they were some of my best paintings. This is Colombian gold, actually. But I learned quite a bit about pre-Columbian gold and was very excited about the Atahualpa legend. I was at the Alexander Studio, McDowell Colony, and Atahualpa, the Inca king, when the Spaniards came, said, "If you spare my life, I'll fill this room up to here." And he reached as high as he could with gold and silver. And they said, "Fine," and he had all of his people bring it, and then they killed him anyway. And it's rumored that they hid all of the gold and silver in the tunnels that run between Cuenca and Ecuador, where I had shows, and Lima, and most of it's never been found. It's a little out of sequence. You'll have to forgive me. I'm not great at PowerPoint lecture organizing. I talked to a lot of mystics and psychics, and one of them was this guy who was hysterical named Michael Butler from Binghamton, New York, and he channeled Rudolph Valentino and his circle, and I did this huge amount of Rudy paintings. And they used to go to Binghamton, New York. There was a Reverend McKinstry who lived there, and a whole organization of mystics like Lilydale upstate. I'm now reading a book called The Psychic Life of Lincoln, which talks, our president went to psychics and seances almost every day and foresaw his death. But this was a very popular thing to do in the mid to late 19th century. And it kind of started with what was called the Rochester Rappers near Rochester, New York, which is a long, interesting story. I call this painting the Tarantella. It's Rudy and Natasha dancing. I'm sure it's not a tarantella, but as a child I remember Captain Hook saying, "It's a tarantella," which is some Italian dance. I'm sure this is a tango. This is Shirley Temple dancing in front of my house from Mr. Bojangles, I believe. This painting was influenced by a Korean artist print called The Virtues, and I was asked by the governor of Louisiana to paint a version of it with the old state capitol by Jenkins, the great architect, for the governor's mansion, which I did, which is one of the foremost Gothic revival buildings in America, and I really had never heard of it and never been to Baton Rouge. And a psychic told me that I would have a past life experience when I went to this building. It was just amazing. I went through a period where I was painting friends daily, and this phase lasted a couple of years. This is Japanese stones, Oliver Stone's motives, Jeffrey Bradfield, interior designer Paul Morrissey, who did all the Warhol's films, my friend Sarah Dodd from Houston, Monique Van Voren, I think that's Becca Case and Thrash. It was just a fun phase when I had more time. Try to get people to show up and sit still. Rudy and the Zimova, I called this Rainbow. No, I'm sorry, it's Rudy and Natasha. That's his wife. I call these Rainbow Rudies. This is Rudy as the Sheik. In spirit, he tells us he was murdered. There were a lot of people out to get him. He was really the first American superstar. He's starting to be included and remembered. Died at the age of 29. Anyway, he's told stories to me that are just extraordinary. This is Mother Mira, who I follow, who's an avatar, who is in Germany. She lives at the foot of Schomburg Castle. I think Gloria Turner-Taxis gave her the building that she's in. This is the Countess Zako Brnevich in her splendor. This was from a French journal of the 30s or 40s. She's a big guide to me and told me that I would buy plantations in Louisiana. And I said I don't want to. She said I don't care, I'm going to. She likes to have me paint her a lot. That's her passport photo picture, which Carlos Slim bought. This is Holly from Paper City magazine in Houston. I did a whole show of Houstonians. That needs no explanation. Here's some of the Lincoln pieces. When I get out to a thing, I usually repeat it endlessly, which I feel that the more you paint something, the more you know about it. It's sort of a Hindu belief. These are little sketches I would do in my hotel room in Germany when I was going to do darshan with Mother Mira. I would do them all day long and then frame them in groups of 100. They've not been shown much. Henry Gelsaw at the Met, when he died, he said I was one of his 14 favorite artists. He's the one that put all the big boys on the map in the 60s, and he was just a great human being. When he died, he asked for my paintings in front of him in his hospital where he had lymphoma. He wore these little silk bow ties, and David Hockney did a lot of paintings of him that were very close, and he kind of invented Dale Chihuly and other great people. Anyway, he liked my watercolors. One of his stories, he said he compared them to Hans Hoffman, which I thought was very great thing. More watercolors. I got walking pneumonia one year and couldn't paint in oils for a while, and all these new ideas came through the watercolor. These are some of my toucans. I had 16 at one point. They only lived to 20 years. Peter came to me recently and offered to give me some birds, and I seemed to pass the test, and then I get this phone call later saying, "Hi, I read that you have like 300 birds. What did you do with the other 250? I said I ate them. Said soft-billed birds only live to 20 if you're lucky. And anyway, explained the physics. And they did give me the birds Really cute. Actually, Henry told me I should move and paint only monkeys, which I did for a while. These are at various points during the 80s. This was for a show at a gallery called M13. The title was Lost. I used to be in a lot of themed shows. These are monkey eyes. I went to school in Mexico for a year between my junior and senior year. No, sophomore and junior. Anyway, and I looked at Frida Kahlo a lot, and Diego Rivera, my grandfather, revered. Anyway, Frida did all these paintings with monkey eyes and parrots as part of her self-portraits. There's one wonderful one in the modern. And then I was also kind of mesmerized by this photo of people in 3D glasses watching a film. So anyway, I started doing these just monkey eye pieces. This one is enormous. It's about 20 feet long. This is a book that Vincent Katz wrote the essay for on my studios and homes. I hate the title, but it was uploaded. This is one of my new Bayou paintings. This is Albania plantation on the Teche. I haven't talked much about it, but you can, I don't know if you can see, but I make these little cross-hatch marks over the surface of the painting into wet paint, one at a time, with the sharpened back of the brush. It's quite labor intensive. This is Albania plantation, the fulfillment of the Countess's prediction. I had a very successful show during Jazz Fest in New Orleans one year. Somebody from Dubai came and bought out my show, and I've known him in India. He'd actually stiffed me in India. Things do turn around in life, I think. Anyway, I said to my dealer, do not let him have the paintings until the check clears. And then we worked it out, and my realtor said, get in the car, we're going to Albania, Miss Emily's died. And I said, what is Albania? She said, just get in the car. And it's 2.5 hours from New Orleans. This house was in one family until about 1900, the Gravenbergs, who were big sugar planters. And the builder of the house went to Yale and was 6'5". It was built in about 1840. And it was very intact and very falling down when I got there. And Miss Emily's stepson, Janice, who had been James, answered the door, used his inheritance to go to Thailand and, become a girl. Anyway, Janice stayed on until I got the film. All the King's Men, we shot about 20 scenes there. When Kate Winslet showed up, Janice got in her little vehicle and moved to Seattle. She couldn't take the competition. One day we went to Foster's house, the ex-governor. She said, tell the governor, Hans Slonem and the mistress of Albania are here to see them. And she was right. This is the back of the house. And it was painted by Persac, but there's the Teche. This is scarily close to the house, but this area has never flooded in its whole history. Front of the house. This is the old Spanish Trail. This is the watercolor of the house of 1860 by Jean-Marie Persac, who painted all the great houses of Louisiana in his day. I don't know that that's worth a fortune. This is the staircase to the house, which was brought from France and somehow assembled. I'll just go quickly. This is the red parlor. I love this painting. It's a cousin of the Grevenbergs. It's by Rink, and I own her sister. It's a portrait. They have on the same dress, pretty much. But this is Hospice Fuselier de Leclerc, and there was a big hurricane in 1851. All the rich planters used to go this thing called Last Isle, and it was just this big resort, and anybody went there, and there's wonderful books that have been written about him. A hurricane came and a boat came to rescue them and said, "Oh, we're dancing, we're not leaving." And only 5 people survived. And she's kind of a poster girl of that era, and I think it looks like an hang. I think it's so beautiful. And I have a copy of the original ones, my friend Dr. Kramer, and I hear her calling out, "My poor children, my poor children." This is Charles Grevenberg, who built the house. He was quite an interesting character. This is my portrait of the Empress Eugenie, Napoleon III's wife. There was an artist that lived on this property named Stubby, who was quite a revered painter as well. I was told in spirit to paint a gathering, a celestial gathering in front of the house, and I didn't hear the part about 5 angels. I only put 4 in, but then a 5th one kind of appeared at the end. In a brutal winter this year. This is a thing they did on a story called The Lonely Doll, a creation of it for Black Book magazine. I got to be in it. The cruelest picture ever taken of me. I was sitting in the tower trying to get away from all of these people with my little mouse hat on and my bald head sticking out. They took a picture of that and published it as their revenge. This is a parlor there. These are wonderful Gothic pieces and not well enough photographed here to talk about. But I'm a big Gothic revival collector. The mantle, the covers are so rare that nobody's ever seen another pair. They're cast iron and original to the house. This is the Sabrec sofa, which was made in New Orleans 1851. I recently acquired the mate to it, and the 3rd one is in the Metropolitan Museum's collection. Just to show you some of the stuff other than painting, and I was going to talk about painting, but I was talking around. This is Kate Hudson shot for the cover of Vogue in my loft a few years ago. This is Donna Karen did her old ad campaign in my studio one year. And I was kind of throwing sort of big billboards all over America with pieces of my paintings showing, and then she recreated her store to look like my studio. This was Jennifer Connelly's, right before she won the Academy Award, they shot her from New York Magazine in my studio. This is just a funny group. That's my friend Sylvia Miles in the striped suit, who was nominated for Academy Award twice, once for Midnight Cowboy, I don't know if any of you remember that with John Voight, and then for Farewell My Lovely, and that's Baby Jane Holzer behind her, who was sort of a Warhol superstar, and Robin Bird in the foreground, who has a late night porno show, and Denise Rich over here before the makeover. She's the one whose husband was pardoned by Clinton. This is from a book called Kings and Their Castles. I do these feather installations when I'm able in museums mostly. I save the molted feathers from my parrots. I have about 60 to 80 parrots in my studio, and every day I gather the unplucked feathers. In fact, I call this not plucked healing feather chamber. This was at Art in General in New York years ago. It took about 30 years to save this many feathers. And some of them are quite rare. The red ones are the underfeather of a Tarraco, an African bird that I have quite a few of. I like to gather a lot of things together, even if I don't like them. Like I hate pressed glass, but somehow I started buying these candlesticks, and I still add to the collection. It just looks great on a big table. This is the origins of my salon-style hanging in my bedroom on Houston Street that I've had since 1975. I'm fascinated with collecting these mid to late 19th century frames, which are very blessed in Cincinnati. I think that we gathered 25 or so. They're getting harder and harder to find. I had one giant studio for 4 years. It was 45,000 square feet and had 89 rooms. Everyone was a different color. And I bought all this stuff at the flea market in New York, and friends of mine were threatening to cut me off because they hated the pink furniture, but they liked it once it was all assembled in one room. These are my Gothic chairs with the monkey paintings. The use of antique frames started when I had my show at the VCU of the Saint paintings. They wanted me to frame it, and contemporary frames are so expensive that I realized that I could buy antique frames for a fraction of the cost, which is not so much true anymore. But I started using them, and I got so excited about using the frames that I changed my style of painting. I started buying pints and gallons of oil paint instead of little tubes, and I started painting wet into wet, which has continued on since the late 80s in my work. Portrait of Consuelo Vanderbilt, the Duchess of Marlborough. This was for something, and they wanted to show portraits. I put Rudy in there too. Anyway, a friend brought somebody over the other day. She said, "Oh, Consuelo Vanderbilt, my sister is the new Duchess of Marlborough. If you ever want to come to Glenham, just give me a ring." He divorced his wife and married a 54-year-old woman who was very wealthy. And anyway, Glenham's in good shape. But this is, I don't know if you know about Consuelo Vanderbilt, but she married the Duke and was painted by Boldini and Sargent and just these extraordinary things of the late 19th century. And she cried all the way down the altar. Apparently he had green teeth and she hated him. But she had to appease her mother, Alva Vanderbilt, who became a suffragette later. These are the monkey eye paintings in that big studio I was telling you about. This is a funny thing I had to do for an artist cookbook for a German publisher. And I don't know if any of you can see this, but there's about 20 animals on the table, including my pet hedgehog, a little spiky ball, and cockatoos up there, and my cat, and 2 or 3 parrots. These are sculptures that I've been making for a long time, and I was finally very lucky to get a project in New Orleans and do an 18-foot public sculpture in aluminum and hand painted it. And it's kind of a landmark now on Veterans Highway in New Orleans. This gives you an idea of the scale of that space. It was like a whole city block. This is my current studio. You can see some of the collections. Perry & Ware, which little known today, was an essential part of every Victorian household. There's a little Belter chair over here. Supposedly the mate to this Majolica piece is in Windsor Castle, this blue thing. And the chintz, that's a piece that a designer called Ron Grimaldi gave me with these curtains. And when I moved, I upholstered the sofa and the chintz. And I was reading a book on Scottish interiors one night and said, "Oh, Ron Grimaldi was visiting us, and he went up into the attic and found this chest of old Scottish chintz, and he took it home and did a whole line for Rose Cummings with it." And I guess this is the byproduct of that visit. These are some of my Gothic chairs poking through here. The Lincoln Wall. This is Brooke Shields. And, Slater, who I adore. She wears blue glasses. And she's had the same look forever. She originally bought something like 300 pairs of these blue glasses. And she's now down to about 3. But anyway, this space is quite large too. It's a monkey. Pardon? One of the sculptures. These are in wood and painted in acrylic. Everything else I do is oil. Toko toucan piece. This is looking down at my sculpture in New Orleans. It's 18 feet into the air. And it has withstood 1.5 hurricanes so far. These things have to be hurricane proof. That's a night picture of it. An early toucan painting from the late 80s. There are so many varieties. It's so exciting when you get into things. You think toucans, oh, the Toko toucan or the fruit looper. There's like 60 varieties of toucans that are so little known. So interesting. This is the typical toucan that people know. These are South American birds. And they're the most comical, wonderful animals. They're a little messy. These are just a cage scene. That's my Persa Tarocco and a red-billed hornbill. So blue and gold macaw. This is Matisse and his birds in his studio at Cartier-Bresson. An ancient mosaic showing you how my grid kind of breaks things down into almost a mosaic-like form and how these subject matters have been used since the beginning of time. This is a painting called Haitian Rope. I went to Haiti 3 times ages ago. I had a show in the museum there. And I have a bird fanatic friend who actually goes to New Guinea every year and pays the natives not to eat the bowerbirds, which there were about 40 left. Anyway, it's just real fun. She said, oh, buy this rope. The birds love it. I think it was hemp, which is some drug or something. So we bring this back, and I threw it all over the cage, and yes, the birds ate it, but I did these paintings before it was completely devoured. This is from a show I did in Venice called Birds in Spirit. This was a 9-foot square painting that I did in, I think, 1986. Again, these are not in any chronological order. I apologize. The Asian woodpecker, which I did an enormous amount of paintings of, had a lot of different significances for me. The flame in Judaism, the Sacred Heart in Christianity, Hindu religion, it would be Garuda, Egypt, Horus. These are cardinals, which is a new entry into my bird painting. They come and sit in my window in Louisiana. They're so beautiful. This is a painting called Stream. When I was in Nicaragua in the late 60s, we'd go out to their plantations and coffee fields and we'd go to these streams. There'd be like 10 million most beautiful butterflies you ever could imagine sitting there drinking out of the stream. It was just the most astounding experience. In fact, the brother of the family that I lived with visited me. We haven't seen each other for 45 years. He now reforests old plantations. And he can remember when I saw my first morpho flying in a coffee plantation, the iridescent blue butterfly. And we were both like gasped. It was such an amazing vision. This is sitas and butterflies. It's like the eternal witness. The paintings always have some sort of spiritual underlying story. These are lunas. I used to stay up at night as a child with a light out on my window praying that aluminum would come. Never happened, but I did. It's funny how prayers are answered later. I was taking the month-long intensive in India. There was a great Indian Luna on the ground next to me when I was meditating, which you only see in museums usually. This is cockatoo whisper. I have 3 of these as pets, and they are the noisiest birds known to man. This is an early one with various varieties: umbrella cockatoos, Moluccan cockatoos, lesser cockatoos, citron cockatoos. There's always so many varieties. This is a palm cockatoo, the black one, which is very rare. This is one of the paintings that Henry Geldsauer owned. This is my ideal patina. This frame is like a dream, the way it's partially broken. It's probably Italian or French. It's shredded velvet and, gilt that's not very shiny anymore. It's like a film or something. This is one of the largest pieces I ever did. I have a 2-story painting I showed you called Seven Saints. I got a call from Mr. Michael Weinstein one day saying, "Do you still have that painting of Seven Saints? I just built offices on 18th and 5th Avenue. He said, get up and measure. I waited till 8 o'clock this morning to call you. I've been up all night." And I had just gotten it back from some show, and I measured it, and it was like 2 feet too big for his wall, and he extended his wall and purchased it and still hanging there. And about 3 months later, he had just built this restaurant on the back of the public library in New York called the Bryant Park Grill. And anyway, he commissioned me to do this giant painting. And this is one of the deciding factor in my getting a larger studio, because I could never see any 2 of these panels together in my Houston Street studio. Anyway, when we installed it, they had given me the wrong measurements. It was 33 inches too long, and we had to cut off. Actually, the stretcher bar was like perfectly positioned to lop off just that amount. And then Brendan Gill, who wrote for the New Yorker, wrote an article called Miracle on 42nd Street about this project. Hugh Hardy was the architect. It's still there. When my birds get out, they often go into the chandeliers. I did a whole series of painting the birds in the chandeliers. This is one of the things Lincoln told me to do, the doves. I call these pieces Lincoln's Abraham's Peace Plan. This is what we call Rudy's Circle. I like the idea of veils and seeing into other worlds, and Bruce Sealander just gave a lecture about my work at the Art Fair in New York. And showed this because of the bunny and this was from one of my first shows at Marlborough Gallery in New York. White peacock. These Cattleya orchids, which are my favorite variety. I do pretty well with them in New York. These are amaryllis. For some reason, I call this painting Birthplace. I guess because of the island quality. Okay, this is the new thing that's kind of taken off this year and last year. Every time I move studios, which I'm about to have to do again, something new happens in my work. So I guess it's worth the nightmare. Moving, for me at this point, almost 180 truckloads. So these are the bunny paintings with them painted into the metallic. A lot of them are extremely large, and then most of them are not. I do these studies every morning. I do like 3 or 4 bunnies before coffee, if I'm there before. I don't really drink coffee, so morning before Diet Coke. Anyway, Hans Hoffman did these paintings called warm-ups. That's sort of where I got the idea to do them, and they were about the same size. I use these frames, and I love doing these installations of them. I just did one at the Children's Museum in Indianapolis for their Playscape installation, which is permanent. I just did 133 of them. The Flint Museum, which is also there permanently. Sometimes I'm accused of being too prolific. I don't know if you're aware of it. I also painted 25 paintings a day some days. So I don't think I'm that prolific. Here's the wall, more organized. This is the book before this one. Dominique Nahas wrote the essay. John Barron wrote the foreword to this book, which is the one we're offering after the talk, who did the movie, wrote Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil, and is a frequent visitor to my houses in Louisiana. His next book was City of Falling Angels, about the burning of the Fenestra in Venice, the opera house. Okay, we finally have the right PowerPoint. This house is called Le Beau, and I tried to save it. I'll say no more. So it was the largest plantation house left standing, the closest to New Orleans. This was my next failed attempt. This is the Rexmere Hotel upstate, which I was a week from closing on. I can't even talk about it. But that was going to be my life's project, saving this building. They're both national landmarks, or were. Okay, this is a movie that just came out called Faded Gigolo, which Woody Allen is in. It's a Tarantino film. You can see my monkey eye painting in the corner, and then there's a whole other scene, the woman wearing these shoes in front of a bird painting of mine. It's actually Naeem Khan's apartment. He's a big dress designer. Here she is in front of the birds. This is Jeremy Irons in front of Lakeside Plantation, which I spent about 6 months covered with vines to make it look decrepit. He's supposed to be a wizard in the movie. Another. Did any of you see this film? This wall is made out of styrofoam. I always like to end on the note of the Countess de Castiglione, who was scandalous for showing her ankles in her day. She was the mistress of Napoleon III and wore these work gowns with just thousands of yards of fabrics. There's book after book on her life and beauty and intrigue, and I find her a great inspiration in different forms. I once asked the Countess de Castiglione, Countess Zakharova Urbanevich, what she thought about the Countess de Castiglione, and she said I would not dare utter a word against her. Well, thank you for coming, and I hope you'll join us next door for wine.